All right. So we will start, inshallah. Today is lesson number 5 of the introduction to Islamic jurisprudence and fiqh madhabs. We will continue, inshallah, with the madhab al-Hanafi. Today is going to be the last lesson of the madhab al-Hanafi, and then we'll start the Maliki madhab, inshallah, from next lesson. Maybe we'll spend maybe a lesson or 2 lessons per madhab. And then we may talk about the usul al-fiqh of the madhabs, and then that would be it for this course, inshallah. I have a little bit of cold, which you may hear in my voice a little. So apology for that. This like weird sound is basically because I have a bit of cold. So let's get started. We will continue the characteristics of al-Hanafi madhab, inshallah. That's basically perhaps the last element of this or our discussion about al-madhab al-Hanafi. We talked before about the collective nature, the consultation, the debate nature of al-madhab al-Hanafi, how it started. We talked about that in the previous lesson. Just to recap, basically the Imam Abu Hanifa wouldn't just dictate his opinion about something and debate it and ask his students to write it down as the madhab opinion. No, he will raise the issue to his students. He will listen to them. They will debate it together, and so on. So this collective nature of al-Hanafi madhab and consultation and debate was something that is like a unique feature in the madhab al-Hanafi. Also, in addition to that, Kufa, which was basically the center of the opinion-based schools and the center of al-madhab al-Hanafi, excelled in the scholarship and was the center of the Islamic world at the time. So, for example, Anas ibn Sirin, one of the followers or tabi'in scholars, said, I came to Kufa and I saw 4,000 scholars seeking hadith and 400 reached fiqh level, right? Because it was like a center of scholarship and center of knowledge of the Islamic world at the time. And as you can see, they're like the fiqh being a faqih. Fiqh means understanding, basically. Fiqh and fihm, and understanding, meaning the same thing. So faqih is somebody who understands the ilm, the knowledge. So not everybody who work or deal with hadith is considered faqih. This is something that's very important. This is how they were perceived and considered at the time, the levels of the scholars. The fiqh scholars were all above, like took a further step than the hadith scholar in general. So hadith scholar who's basically just a scholar who go and gather hadith and collate them and so on. Not everybody, not every hadith scholar, not every scholar of hadith reached the level of being a faqih, right? Abu Hanifa's companions or students who wrote the books with him were 40 men, of who were 40 men. And those 40 men were, sorry about the typo here. Those 40 men were basically the seniors of the scholars, the cream of the cream, the top pinnacles, the top tier students or top tier scholars. Those were the students of Abu Hanifa. So Imam Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari says Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu put forth his madhab in consultation with his companions, with his students, out of abundance of caution in the deen, because he didn't want to just say his opinion and that he wanted to make sure that what is written down is correct as possible. So that's why it wasn't just his dictation. He would address an issue after another, hear what his students have to say about each issue, debate it among themselves for months until a consensus is reached. And after that, Abu Yusuf would write it down. And we already said that previously. We're just recapping, a little bit of recapping. So the Madhab al-Hanafi excels in hypothetical matters that have not occurred necessarily, right? But are very likely or likely to occur. And this is the main feature in the opinion-based schools. This was something that Abu Hanifa pioneered in, and then it became the norm in the fiqh after that. Abu Hanifa deeply examines the hadith to determine and identify any abrogated hadith. And therefore, he applies the affirmed hadith, the hadith that he, after investigation and studying, finds that it is affirmed, it's authentic, and it can be acted upon. And he was well aware of the hadith of Ahl al-Kufa. Again, this is basically something that, or a statement that been made by one of the scholars. His name is Al-Muwaffaq al-Makki. And all that to rebut the lies that Salafis and some like says about Abu Hanifa didn't know hadith or anything like that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And we explain exactly what how Abu Hanifa considered and looked at the hadith as evidence. So the basis of the Hanafi madhab, the sources are Quran, number one for sure, Sunnah, Sahaba's ruling. If no consensus among Sahaba, then choose from their opinion. So basically, the Sahaba's ruling, if they agreed and there is a consensus about something, this is how they made judgment about an issue, he will take that. He will not change it. If, however, Sahaba's opinion, or there are several or different Sahaba's opinions, he will choose from them. He will study their opinions and so on, and then choose one of them. But he will not abandon all of them. If there are Sahaba opinions, he will take one of them, but he will not basically say, okay, no, I reject all Sahaba opinion and bring something from my own. He will never do that. If, however, there is no opinion of Sahaba, and basically it's opinion of the Tabi'een after that, like Ibrahim al-Nakhai, al-Shu'abi, Ibn Sirin, al-Hasan al-Basri, and so on, then he will do ijtihad similar to them. So he said, okay, they made their ijtihad, I will do my ijtihad. So he basically, Quran is certainly number one. Anything in the Quran that is clear, done and dusted. He cannot, for sure, nobody can ignore what is in the Quran and take and like give his own opinion, right? And then Sunnah. If there is Quran is not clear about something, Sunnah. If Sunnah is not clear about something, the Sahaba ruling. If there is a consensus, he will take it. And then if there is no consensus, he will choose among the Sahaba's opinions, but he will never abandon them all. He will not invent a different opinion against the Sahaba's opinions or any of all the Sahaba's opinion. If beyond that, then he will basically do ijtihad, and he will not follow necessarily the tabi'in. He himself is a tabi'i, although he is a younger tabi'i, as we talked about before. So the evidence, the ranking of evidence in the Hanafi madhab are Quran, Sunnah, Sahaba's opinions, consensus of the ijma', okay, and then inference. He will do his own deduction, his own inference, if there is nothing addressing the issue exactly. And after that, if he cannot do like, or after that, if there is a preferential deduction, he will also do that. And then at the end, the custom of the land, what the land is basically got used to. Yes, brother. Anybody who has like a prayer to catch, you can please go, and you don't have to seek anybody's permission. Somebody raised a hand. Can you please, if you have a question, can you put it in the Q&A? All right. So the Sunnah, in a Hanafi perspective, the Sunnah is explanatory to the Quran when there is a need to explain the Quran by Sunnah. All right. And that's basically normal as well, right? That also the other madhabs, as you will see later on, there are a lot of similarities between the four madhabs in how they are addressing the usul of fiqh, or the Sunnah and the Quran and so on. However, the extent of which there is a necessity to explain Quran by Sunnah is not as extensive as in the hadith-based school. And this goes right into how the hadith has been affirmed against the Quran. And we talked about that many times. We talked about the tawatur and akhbar al-ahad in previous lessons. So please, you can go and refer to that in the YouTube lessons that we've taken before. I think in the Arba'in al-Nawawiyya, I think we may have addressed that. And we're going to talk about that, inshallah, also in the hadith course, which inshallah will start soon. But basically, there is a difference between what is being affirmed as mutawatir. Mutawatir means certain 100%, which is the Quran, and very few hadith. And what has been affirmed, or we received through what we call akhbar ahad, singularities, like a singular or two or three or four number of chains of narrations that did not reach the tawatur level. And basically, because they didn't reach the tawatur level, this means their like authenticity is dhanni, is not certain. It is very likely. It ranges from being very likely to not at all, if it is like a mawdu' hadith or kadib, right? So sahih and weak and so on. So the rank of the hadith. But at the end of the day, even the hadith sahih, if it is not mutawatir, there is always a doubt whether it was actually said or not by the Prophet, peace be upon him. Even if that doubt is 1%, it is still less than the Quran. And therefore, if hadith contradicts with something in the Quran, clear in the Quran, then therefore it cannot be. You cannot leave the Quran for to act upon a hadith, even if that hadith is sahih. And that's the difference between the faqih and those ignorance nowadays, who basically just say, "Oh, we take hadith. You take hadith." But who are you to think that you in yourself that you are able to understand the hadith better than those fuqaha? These people can't even correctly do a grammar i'rab of one sentence or ayah. So how can you like make sure that you understand the hadith better than these guys? Anyway, we talked about that before. So and therefore, from a Hanafi madhab, there is a greater, you will sense a greater sense of, or you will feel a greater sense of rank that give to Quran. Okay, all madhab gives the Quran number one for sure, but for madhab al-Hanafi, the Quran to them, like it is the clarity of the Quran and the nas of the Quran, it has a very high level, and they distinguish between halal or distinguish between fard, obligatory, and wajib, as we'll see based on the Quran and Sunnah. We'll see that in a moment. Anyway, yeah. So Quran is at a higher precedence level in affirmation than Sunnah for sure, and Quran as an evidence is at a much higher rank than Sunnah. And therefore, it is not like there is an ayah and then there is a hadith, and how to we will take what the hadith is saying. It is there is a precursor question, a prerequisite. Is the ayah clear? Do we really need the hadith to explain the ayah or not? Right? That's another question that the Hanafi methodology asks before going on and basically dealing with the hadith, and to what extent we need the hadith and so on. So if the Quran affirms something without ambiguity at all, then it's affirmed with certainty. This is a compulsory, this is fard. This is what we call fard. This is certain, qat'i. If Sunnah affirms something, however, on the other hand, it is affirmed with high probability. So it is obligation, it's obligatory. It's what we call in Hanafi Madhab wajib, right? But it is not fard. What does that mean? That means if someone rejected the Sunnah here, rejected the wajib, the obligatory, he is not kafir. He is not declared as kafir. But if he rejected the fard, he is a kafir. Because rejection of the fard, rejection of the Quran, which is certain 100%, there is no question about it. But if rejection of Sunnah, it is still, even if it is Sahih Sunnah, it is high probability, and therefore he is not kafir. Unless, of course, he reject all the Sunnah as a source, then he is not considered Muslim for sure. That's a different story, right? But we are talking about like individual or specific hadith here or there. If somebody rejected hadith sahih, we cannot call him kafir just by rejection. He may be fasiq, he may be like did something wrong and so on, but he is not kafir. So this distinguishing is very, very important, and it is a characteristic of the madhab al-Hanafi. Other madhabs, they don't have that differences. Fard, wajib is the same. It's basically just one rank. Fard is a wajib. With madhab al-Hanafi, no. Fard is something higher than the wajib. There is a compulsory, fard, obligatory, which is wajib. And similarly in the haram and the makruh. If something in the Quran said haram, then that is haram 100% done. That's certain. If something has been make haram or wrong by the sunnah, then it is makruh. Makruh tahriman. So it is a haram, walakin makruh. Not the same level as what is affirmed by the Quran. All right, so this does not mean that Imam Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu rejects Sunnah. It just provides a more comprehensive and detailed ranking of the evidence. And of course, the scripture's text takes precedence over inference, so he wouldn't make his own inference and overrides something that is clear in the Quran or in the Sunnah. As we said before, the inference, qiyas, and deduction and so on comes after the Quran and Sunnah, if there is nothing in the Quran and Sunnah. Also, the hadith with tawatur is instrumental. He will use it. Like the tawatur, hadith with tawatur is also considered certain. Well-known hadith, there are hadith that are famous, very, very well known, very widely accepted and famous, but they didn't reach the level of tawatur. These hadiths he will also elevate to a very high level of evidential ranking. He will consider them very high level because they are famous hadith. And then comes after that the non-mutawatir and non-famous hadith, which he will use and rely on for his inferences, right? So if there is no mutawatir hadith, if he needs to make inference, then he will use those hadith in order to come up with his deduction and so on. The Hanafi madhab, like when they do that, you will see that maybe a hadith is sahih, but he will not accept it or will not take it at a face value for a lot of reasons, because he requires even more robust standards than the hadith scholars for hadith acceptance. And this is something that is very, very important. And those who claim to be hadith scholars nowadays, many of them don't understand that. They don't differentiate between scholar terminology of hadith and ranking of the hadith scholar, the hadith science ranking, and the fiqh ranking and the fiqh acceptance in acting upon. So hadith sahih, that's good and dandy, everything is fine, yeah, but should it be acted upon or not, something else. For example, as we will see also later on, Imam Malik, for example, in his hadith book al-Muwatta, he narrated hadith sahih, which is about like in buying and selling, al-bai'an bil-khiyar. It's a very famous issue. There, the seller and like when you buy something, you have what we call khiyar al-bay' or khiyar al-aib. Like there is a period of time where you have option to return it and so on. He did not use it. He did not take it. He said, no, I cannot take it. Why? Because the sons of the Sahaba and the sons of the Sahaba that he saw, who he was living among, didn't do that. And therefore, there must be a reason that this hadith was not used, was not acted upon. Maybe it was cancelled, abrogated after that, but we don't have the abrogation. Maybe it was in certain circumstances. Maybe there are a lot of maybes. So for fiqh, it is a level higher than just being ranking hadith sahih and daif and so on. It is whether there is doubts about me acting upon it and so on and so forth, right? So this is something that it is well known or has been known for like ages before, but due to the ignorance that we are living now in and the widespread of ignorance about these things, people just tend to think that, yeah, if a hadith is sahih, then you just use it right away. It is not like that. Also, they have on al-Hanafi madhab, narration of a scholar who is known for his understanding, for his fiqh, takes precedent over other narrations when conflicting. So if we have two narrations of hadith, for example, one narrated by a fiqh scholar and one narrated by a hadith scholar, we take the fiqh scholar, not the hadith scholar. Why? The fiqh scholar, he is somebody, he understands the evidence. He has been, he knows the how to deduct and infer from the evidence. He understands things. The other guy is just basically narrating what he heard, and he may have misunderstood it. He may have forgot a word or changed it, or down the line it may have been narrated in a meaning, by meaning, not by words. And maybe the narrator at that time in the middle didn't get the meaning. Maybe there's something added to it, more words and so on. There are a lot of maybes, and therefore the narration of a fiqh scholar is basically takes precedent over others. And also the general rule is that something that is based on a certain evidence, a rule that is based on a certain evidence takes precedence over ahad hadith. which is a non-mutawatir, as we said. And therefore, if a hadith contradicts from every aspect a rule that is based on a proper understanding of Quran or Sunnah affirmed through tawatur. So if you have Quran ayah or a Sunnah hadith that is mutawatir, which is basically certain, and out of this Quran or Sunnah, you can infer a rule, a clear rule comes out of the Quran or Sunnah. It's very clear, it's certain about it. And then you found a hadith that contradicts it. At first, you will try to combine, you'll try to look at a different aspect to combine between these two evidence. But if not, then you throw the hadith, that hadith away. Because even if that hadith at face value seems to be correct or sahih, the fact that it contradicts with something certain means that it signifies that there is an issue with that hadith, right? This issue makes it doubtful. You cannot act upon it then. And as we said, it could be abrogated. Maybe there is another hadith that basically canceled that. Maybe it was only for a certain period of time. Maybe it was only for a certain circumstance, for certain people. And then the circumstance or those people or the time that it was applicable on, that didn't come to us. Basically, it was truncated, like only part of the hadith came to us, not all of it. And that the missing part gives context or gives that it only applicable to certain period or whatever. And we didn't get that. So we just got a part of the hadith, right? And therefore, we cannot act upon it. Because in that case, you will be throwing away the Quran or throwing away something that is certain. And this is something very important. As we said, the fuqaha deal with this. Hadith scholars, the great hadith scholars, because all the fuqaha are actually hadith scholars. They have their own Muslim, they have their own hadith narrations. Like Malik has his Muwatta, Shafi'i has Musnad al-Shafi'i, book of hadith, and so on, because they were collating and gathering hadith. They are hadith scholars. But above that, they were also fuqaha. Okay? Not all hadith scholars reached this level. The majority of them were just basically compiling hadith and writing them down. Right? So there is not always a direct correlation between acting upon a hadith in fiqh and the hadith being graded as sahih by hadith scholar. Hadith being graded by sahih or hasan or whatever by hadith scholar, that is a terminology within the hadith science. A faqih will look at that, will take the hadith and will consider it from a very wider aspect, from every other aspect, and combine other hadith and like make a comprehensive study about it, weigh the evidence, and then come up with his judgment, which may be not taking the face value of the hadith or the zahir, the literal meaning of the hadith. Maybe he like do some reinterpretation of the hadith in order to conform with the more higher level of evidence, and so on. We have a question. Can you please give some great or popular hadith scholars, but they were not faqih? There are a lot, for sure. There are so many. The majority weren't. Because we don't have, like, they didn't even act in that sense as a faqih, as a fuqaha. They had their own fiqh. They are, maybe in themselves they are mujtahideen, but they didn't have a methodical and school of fiqh that has been taught to others and so on, in order to make inference for other issues that happen. Like you cannot take, for example, hadith or Kitab al-Bukhari and say, right, I'm going to apply al-Bukhari like as a book of fiqh. You cannot do that. It is not a book of fiqh. The Bukhari himself was a faqih, but he didn't write fiqh book. He didn't do a fiqh scholarship and so on. Okay, you cannot take Sahih Muslim as is and say, all right, I'm going to use it as a fiqh book. No, you cannot do that. You take the hadith of Muslim and then you combine everything else, and basically it's like a machine. A faqih mind is like a machine where all the evidence goes in, and there is a certain rationale, there are certain rules and parameters by which his mind thinks, which is basically the usul al-fiqh. And then the answer or the judgment with the rule is basically is the outcome. So those great hadith scholars were fuqaha, but they did not write fiqh book. Bukhari, Muslim, and so on, they were fuqaha. Came after them a lot of non-fuqaha, even like the majority. Like what we said, like Anas ibn Sirin earlier on, when he went to Kufa, he found 4,000 students of hadith, only 400 with fiqh, right? Nowadays, however, we have some people claim to be hadith scholars. They are not even hadith scholars. Like Al-Albani, for example, he is not a hadith scholar. He is considered by his people as like the greatest hadith scholar ever lived. He is like, if you measured him against the standards of hadith scholars, no, he is an ignorant. He was ignorant. He didn't know anything from a hadith scholar. He was not a muhaddith. A muhaddith has to have like memorized thousands of hadith with isnad. He didn't. He wasn't even like able to recollect number, like maybe 100 hadith or even 20 hadith with full isnad. They didn't have isnad even. They don't have isnad or ijazah to the books of hadith. Like somebody who don't have a continuous chain of isnad. So how are you muhaddith? How are you consider yourself muhaddith and you don't even have isnad to the book that you are claiming to be muhaddith of, right? And then they did even something that's even more dangerous. It was basically just looking at the hadith and trying to basically come up with rules out of the hadith without proper understanding of the usul al-fiqh, and without studying usul al-fiqh, without being able to have, without the tools that you should have in order to weigh evidence or even understand the text. How can you understand the text and claim that you understand the text if you can't even do i'rab, like grammar of something? They didn't, like, don't get me started. The level of these people are very low, that we cannot even consider them students of ilm, let alone scholars. So that's a lot of nowadays like shuyukh and so on. But that doesn't for sure, that is not like for like al-Bukhari and Muslim. These are great scholars, and they also with mujtahideen, they reached that level for themselves, but we did not inherit their fiqh in order to have a madhab, for example. There is no Bukhari madhab, there is no Muslim madhab, and so on. Like a lot of other madhabs that have been lost, like madhab al-Thawri, madhab al-Layth ibn Sa'd. Layth ibn Sa'd was a great scholar. Al-Shafi'i said, I found al-Layth even a better faqih than Malik, Imam Malik. But his students basically lost his knowledge. It wasn't passed on to us and so on. Okay, I hope that is clear. So there's no criticism whatsoever about al-Bukhari, Muslim, al-Tirmidhi, Abu Dawood, and so on. These are great scholars. I mean, or my criticism is to others who are to different level, or even not not even considered hadith scholars. And also there are a lot of as we're going to see later on, there are scholars of fiqh that not even at the same level as mujtahideen. We'll talk about that in a moment. So ranking of hadith as sahih, hasan, da'if, and so on is just a terminological thing in hadith science. But having a sahih hadith does not automatically and necessarily mean this hadith is actually correct. It could have changed in wording by the narrators. It could have been abrogated, right? And so many other things as we talked about. And also, if hadith is da'if by others, if somebody says this hadith is da'if, that doesn't mean necessarily it is actually not authentic. It could be authentic. And therefore, in some circumstances, fuqaha will be able to detect that and act upon the hadith if it is acceptable to them from a fiqh perspective. So we have to distinguish between hadith science and fiqh as a science. Okay, you don't go to an engineer to make a procedure on you. For example, if you need to take a procedure, you don't do to engineer to do that. You go to a surgeon, right? You go a doctor to make a prescription. You don't go to accountant to give you a prescription. So we have to distinguish that. If you are if you are collating hadith, if you are looking about evaluation of the men of the hadith, it's grading from a hadith point of view, then yeah, you go to the hadith scholars. If you want to know a rule or a judgment or a fatwa, you go to a fatwa scholars, go to a fiqh scholars. If you want to know something about aqidah, you go to aqidah scholars, and so on. One of the main problem we are living in now is basically a lot of hadith scholars went into and talked about aqidah, and they cause a lot of trouble. Ibn Khudaymah, a great hadith scholar, authored a book of aqidah, totally corporeal, basically full of corporeality, right? He caused a problem because he went into a science or a ilm or a body of knowledge that he's not aware of. He doesn't have the tools to go there, and so on. So just as to put in your mind, so sahih from hadith science terminology is something here. Sahih to act upon from a jurisprudence scholar's perspective, something else. Okay. So the standard sometimes is higher, and sometimes it's even totally different. All right. Also, some more characteristics and basis of the Hanafi madhab. The Hanafi madhab expands in the inferences because of the hypothetical element of this school, as we talked about before, right? Because Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu didn't just stop at studying the rule or judgment of an issue that they are talking about, that something that happened, but he dived deeper into every event related to the issue. Right? So this issue, what other events may contribute to it, how it will contribute to it, how they will affect the people, and how they may affect the people. What are the causes behind these issues? What are the parameters and the attributes that influence the rule, and so on, and start basically thinking about all that, and provide wealth of information that basically we use until now. So that's for deduction and so on. Now, as moving on as the next level of the sources, preferential deduction, it involves, remember we talked about Quran, Sunnah, Sahaba ruling, consensus, deduction or inference, and preferential deduction. It involves breaking a rule that applies to similar situations to respect a stronger aspect of Sharia, right? So what we call istihsan, it is something that preferred, right? it is not, it doesn't mean that he preferred it because like subjectively it's on his own judgment. No, he applying the rule in some circumstances where applying the rule, the normal rule to every situation. Like this rule is applicable to every situation, but you come to a certain situation and applying that rule is going to lead to something that contradicts with a higher aspect of Sharia. And then when you come to that, he has to break this rule and say, okay, this rule doesn't apply. This rule does not apply here because of there is another matter or another aspect of Sharia that has to be respected. If I applied it, this Sharia aspect will not be respected. I cannot do that. I basically respect the Sharia and I break that rule here. And this is basically the istihsan. This is something that Madhab al-Hanafi has. Not all the madhabs have the same thing. And even there is a misunderstanding sometimes about what it means. Like this is a big topic that we may address in different courses. Then come after that, the last is a custom. It is also respected in Hanafi madhab to the extent that if there is no scriptural text about a situation, customs act as a Sharia rule. All right? So even if there is no rule, the custom itself becomes the rule, which is basically how people deal with things, for sure, provided that it does not contradict with Sharia, for sure. All right. Now, the Hanafi schools across continents. The Hanafi madhab spread across continents in the Islamic world, and basically there were many schools depending on like the geographical location. The early scholars in Iraq, right? Because Imam Abu Hanifa was basically in Kufa, which was the center and the capital of the Islamic empire at the time. And then there are scholars of Balakh. Balakh city is in Afghanistan, current Afghanistan. There is a scholars of Khorasan, which is northeastern Iran, southern Turkmenistan, and northern Afghanistan. Place like a city called Khorasan. It also has its own like features, characteristics, school, Hanafi school there, which differs from the other schools. All these are like different schools of Hanafi madhab. There's also the scholars of Samarkand, which is a city in Uzbekistan now. Scholars of Bukhara is also in Uzbekistan, and others. These are the main Hanafi schools around the Islamic world at the time. Now remember, we talked about the scholars' ranks. There is an absolute mujtahid, which, as we said before, top tier skilled in jurisprudence and ability to deduce judgments from raw sources of Sharia with complete understanding of all necessary tools, right? Like the Arabic language, the understanding of the Quran, and so on and so forth. And those are Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf, Muhammad, Zufar, Imam Malik, Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad, Imam al-Thawri, al-Awza'i, al-Layth ibn Sa'd, as we said, Ibn Abi Layla, and others. So all those were absolute mujtahid, but the madhab that we received and inherited and basically developed over the generations to generation, as we talked about before, are the four madhabs. And that's basically talked about before in previous lessons. And then there is a mujtahid of the madhab. So these scholars do ijtihad within the fundamentals of the madhab, within the usul of the madhab, apply the methodical way of imam of the madhab to the madhab. And then there are imitators of madhab, what we call imitators, muqallidin. Like, be careful. These are scholars, still scholars, great scholars, but they just different rank. They are not mujtahid. They weigh all opinions within the madhab. They gather evidence of the issues at hand, compare between earlier scholars' opinion, extract supporting evidence from opinions, and so on. So they investigate, they study, they collate, they classify, they weigh evidence, and so on, weigh opinions, and so on, and then produce something or say, okay, this opinion is better than this, or this opinion is more applicable than this, and so on. But they work with opinions already established by mujtahideen. Okay, they do not invent a new opinion. So these are imitators of madhab. For the Hanafi scholars, there are the early scholars. These are the students of Abu Hanifa, right? And like Abu Yusuf and Muhammad and Zufar, and these three are basically absolute mujtahideen. So we have a question: can mujtahid of madhab go against the opinion of the absolute mujtahid of his madhab? Not if he is like restricted by the madhab. If he is restricted by the madhab, he will not do that. But that happens from some scholars who did not see that they have to follow the madhab. They basically just maybe get another opinion from other, and we will see that that's why some books, for example, are not authorized in the madhab, because the authors of those books went out of the madhab. All right. And then we have the late senior scholars, what we call like tabaqa, or level of scholars who are kibar al-mutaakhirin, late senior, like Abu Bakr al-Khassaf, al-Tahtawi, Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, al-Karhi, al-Sarakhsi, al-Bazdawi, Qadi Khan, and so on. All those are considered late senior scholars. And then there are evidence extracting imitators. Now we are expanding about those three levels we talked about earlier. There are evidence extracting imitators. Those imitators, they are imitation or imitators. They are not inventing new opinions, but they extract the evidence. They are able to extract the evidence. Now, when you look at this, you will come to like a better way of understanding that. Let's go back to here, for example. If you talk about absolute mujtahid, he is mujtahid from every aspect, from every like perspective, every aspect, every viewpoint. He is a mujtahid. Mujtahid of madhab, he is a mujtahid. He do ijtihad, but within a smaller circle. Imitator of madhab, he also does ijtihad. He also mujtahid, but within a narrower scope of ijtihad. Okay, because he does ijtihad in weighing the opinions, in extracting the evidence, in providing the supporting evidence. All that is also ijtihad to some extent, but it is not, it is a very narrow scope of ijtihad, and so on. So that's exactly what happened here. What happens here? We have the early scholars, those are absolute mujtahid, most of them. We have a late senior scholars, they are mujtahideen as well, but to in a narrower scope, or like a lesser extent. Evidence extracting imitators like Abu Bakr al-Razi, al-Gassas, and his peers. They didn't reach level of ijtihad, or of that higher level of ijtihad, but they are mujtahideen within the usul, so they are able to elaborate on the ambiguous opinions. So sometimes you will have a narration or an opinion that has some ambiguity, whether what did exactly the Imam mean? Did he mean this or that? It could be understood or interpreted in this way or in that way. So those are scholars who are able to do the ijtihad to basically tell you, okay, that what the Imam meant is this or that, and so on. Okay? And we call them like مقلدين in تخريج evidence. We call it تخريج, extracting imitators. And then weighing imitators, opinion weighing imitators, a lesser extent, or a lesser extent of, or narrow down scope of ijtihad, which is basically al-Qaduri, Burhanuddin, and their peers. They can weigh some narrations of opinions over others and rank them in preference, applicability, uniformity, whether that opinion uniform, or which opinion is more uniform with the usul, with the foundation or the fundamental of deduction, and so on. And then there is a narration recognition imitators, the least level of scholars, or the last level of scholars, who are able to recognize different narrations. They are aware of their sources and able to determine which narration is stronger or rare, and so on. Okay. Again, these are great scholars, but their ijtihad level is less than the previous rank, and so on. Okay. Some notable Hanafi scholars: Nasr al-Samarqandi, Abu Bakr al-Balkhi, Abu Bakr al-Razi al-Qassas, Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, al-Dabbusi, Imam Zada, الساعاتي ابن الساعاتي, الكمال ابن الهمام, a great scholar, ابن كمال باشا, and so on, السرخسي, البزدوي, صدر الشريعة, son تاج الشريعة, النسفي, there are 3 نسفيز, الخيالي, سعد التفتزاني, الشريف الجرجاني, الشاشي, and so on. So many great Hanafi scholars we have for sure. النووي was مجتهد محدث but not فقيه. How so? النووي is certainly فقيه, محدث ومجتهد وفقيه for sure. النووي is one of the main figures, main imams in Madhab al-Shafi'i. We'll talk about him inshallah. I'll talk about the Madhab al-Shafi'i later on. Now the ranking or categories of the issues itself. There are foundation issues, which is in Zahir al-Riwayah. There are anomaly narration, opinion of Imam or his students, accepted for fatwa if not contradictory to usul. So remember we talked about Zahir al-Riwayah before. Zahir al-Riwayah are the 6 books that have been written by Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, the Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan. And these basically were narrated or received with tawatur, almost with tawatur, or mashhur, or famous. So they are basically widely accepted. There is no problem. Like they are the most respected narrations for the fatwa. And there is a anomaly, or not anomaly. It's more of uncommon. Perhaps I think I called it uncommon after that. Narration, which is opinion of his, like the imam or his students, and they are accepted for fatwa if they don't contradict usul al-fiqh of the madhab. And there are extrapolation opinion or opinions of late scholars that received wide acceptance from the majority of scholars. Again, that is accepted for fatwa. So the late scholars that did ijtihad or said something, extrapolating or deducing from the usul al-fiqh that has been established by the earlier scholars, and their opinion has been widely accepted. So again, that is basically taken and accepted for fatwa and basically considered. And then there are some individual extrapolation or individual opinions by some scholars. And when you measure that against usul, or basically how to deal with that, or how the scholars deal with that, they measure that against the usul of fiqh or usul of the madhab, or similar opinions of the salaf, and then they determine whether it can be accepted or not based on that. If it goes against the usul of fiqh of the madhab, then it's not accepted as a madhab al-Hanafi. Now, the categories of the Hanafi books: we have the mutun, textbooks, we have the explanation or commentary books, and we have fatwa books. These are 3 categories. The authorized Hanafi books, they are now, let's talk about the authorized Hanafi books. We have rank 1 foundation books. These are Zahir al-Riwayah. Al-Riwayah is basically the narration, the opinions, the collated opinions of Imam Abu Hanifa and his 2 students, or the students, as written by Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan. We remember we talked last lesson, I think it was last lesson, that Muhammad ibn al-Hasan Shaybani wrote 6 books, and that's basically together called Zahir al-Riwayah. Al-Riwayah, the narration, the face value, or the Zahira, because it was narrated with tawatur, There is no doubt that these are actually the Imam and his students' opinions. Then there is a book called Al-Kafi, written by Imam al-Marwazi. And that book is basically collected the 6 books together. Okay? So these 6 books, collected them together just in one book as a reference book. So basically, again, it's also considered foundation book because it's just reproduction of Zahir al-Riwaya 6 books. It's called Al-Kafi by al-Marwazi. And then there are there are a lot of commentaries and explanation to the Al-Kafi. The most notable one is the commentary called Mabsut al-Sarakhsi. There is a typo here, sorry again. Al-Sarakhsi, okay? So these are the foundation books. Then we have uncommon books, Nawadir, what we call Nawadir. These are narrations attributable to Muhammad ibn Hassan, to the Imam or the other students, but narrated through few chain of narrations. Ahad, not tawatur. So remember that rank 1, the Zahira Riwaya, reached tawatur, or at least some of it famous, very, very famous, like widely spread. These ones here are like not as common as the other one, are not like proven or established at the previous rank. So their attribution sometimes is doubtful. They are sahih and daif. So the general rule is basically you don't take what in them. But in very rare circumstances, sometimes you actually take, and some issues there takes precedence for a lot of reasons, which is out of the scope of what we're talking about now. Yeah. Okay. So these like books that written by Imam Muhammad and narrated or written, like recorded by his students, some of his students, and then passed on to other generation and scholars, but as I said, didn't reach the same level of affirmation as the previous one. Okay. And then there are fatwa books. And these books is basically scholars will take the previous books, for example, like the Zahir Riwaya and so on, but then they will add to it, they will study the other issues, and they will give their opinion and their fatwa about it. Right? Like Al-Nawazil by Abu Layth al-Samarqandi. Now, these kind of books, it is a mixed package. Right? It mixes opinions of early scholars with late scholars. It mixes Imam opinions and other opinions. Sometimes it's consistent with the usul al-fiqh of Imam. Sometimes they aren't. They are basically like they are good for academic purpose and research, but they cannot, or they are not used to establish the Hanafi madhab as what is the opinion of the Hanafi madhab, right? And therefore they take less precedence than the uncommon books. And therefore issues here, if there are some issues, masail, some issues that is written on those books that they are not in the previous like ranks, not in the Nawadir or not in the Zahir al-Riwaya, then they are not accepted unless they conform with the usul and has proof of its authenticity to be applicable, right? Because remember, we are talking about Madhab al-Hanafi. So what is the Madhab al-Hanafi? What is the Imam Abu Hanifa opinion and his students? What is, and if there is no opinion, what will be the opinion if we apply the rules and the usul al-fiqh that the Imam has established? There's the question. We are not interested in every scholar's opinion. We're only interested of opinions that is basically following the Hanafi madhab, because we're talking about the madhab al-Hanafi. A question we have: what is the main difference between usul madhab, usul fiqh, and usul din? I'm not sure this madhab or you mean usul fiqh and usul din. Usul din is al-aqidah, al-fiqh al-akbar. That's the aqidah. Usul al-fiqh is the methodical way or the methodology established by every madhab in how they reach their judgment for every rule. Okay, like now, for example, we talked about Madhab al-Hanafi. They have Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', Ara' al-Sahaba, and so on and so forth. And then they have the istihsan. Istihsan is not something that is accepted as a usul fiqh for every madhab. So every madhab will have their own usul. Imam Malik, for example, have one of his usul of fiqh, foundation or fundamentals of fiqh, is the amal ahlul Madina. Amal ahlul Madina. So basically, what ahlul Madina do, because he knows that those ahlul Madina are basically sons of the Sahaba. So they do what their parents taught them to do, and their parents are doing what the Sahaba taught them to do, and so on. So this, to him, is an important asl, and that's why sometimes when he find a hadith that contradict what Ahl al-Madina is doing, the entire Ahl al-Madina is doing something, and there's a hadith, and they know that hadith, but they are not following it, this means right away that this hadith cannot be followed or abrogated or whatever. Another question: what do we mean by Tehri students? What Tehri? I don't know what that is. Okay. Now moving on, we have rank 1E. It's basically extension to rank 1. Rank 1, remember, is the Zahir al-Riwaya and Kitab al-Kafi. These are summarized textbooks, what we call mutun. Matn is a summary, a textbook that's summarized so that is easy for students to memorize. Okay. And these books are by the senior scholars of the madhab. For example, these are well known. The status of these students are well known. Their knowledge and their level of ijtihad is known. Their piety is known. Like Imam al-Tahawi, Imam al-Karhi, al-Marwazi, al-Qadduri. So these imams produced a mutun, like textbook, so that it is easier for their students to memorize. Okay. These are basically summary of Zahir al-Riwaya. More or less. There are exceptions and so on, but that's basically the in general. And therefore they are considered extension to the foundation books. Okay. And therefore scholars say what is in the mutun takes precedent, meaning these mutun take precedent over the commentary books. And of course, the commentary books take over the fatwa, because the fatwa books, as you saw here, the fatwa of, not the fatwa of Madhab al-Hanafi necessarily, is the fatwa of the author of that book, which is not necessarily conform or may not necessarily conform with the usul al-fiqh of Madhab al-Hanafi, the foundations of deduction used for the Madhab al-Hanafi. And then there are other rank which are summarized books, mutun, but they are mutun of later scholars and not considered same level, like al-Wiqaya, al-Kanz, and so on. These are not authorized, or basically takes very low level of authenticity. And the reason of that, because these mutun usually don't have a isnad of the opinion and doesn't provide argument. They tend to change the wording. Sometimes they may change the meaning and so on. So the general rule of thumb is basically for rank 1, for something that takes precedence over everything else, is the foundation books, which are Zahir al-Riwaya, and the summaries of al-Tahawi, al-Karhi, al-Qaduri, and these books. And therefore there are unauthorized books, and these are unauthorized because maybe for a lot of reasons. Sometimes the status of the scholar who wrote the book is not fully known. We don't know exactly who is this scholar, to what extent he reached, at what level. If is he a imitator, is he a mujtahid? We don't know. Maybe it is also mixed with his own opinions, or mixed with other madhabs opinions, or collected unauthentic narrations of the Imam Abu Hanifa opinions, for example, and so on. As an example of that is the book is called Al-Siraj al-Wahhaj, which is explanation of Al-Qadduri. So Al-Qadduri itself is an authentic or authorized book in al-Madhab as a matn, right? As a textbook. But Al-Siraj al-Wahhaj isn't, because in his explanation, he basically didn't restrict himself to the Madhab al-Hanafi and so on. All right. Any questions?